you may be new, say hi. And this is just where we get to talk about anything we'd like, World of Warcraft wise. And I suppose we could, to begin with, potentially, discuss the new beta build. They've just announced they're bringing it down. They said, Blizzard actually said they're bringing it down. The only thing they talked about was removing or trying to fix disconnect issues due to what they call a missing art asset. But as some eagle-eyed people have noticed, the builds previously, and certainly the build I've got as shown at the moment, is like 8.0.1 point and then load of numbers. And they've been like that, steadily going up. Whereas the new build, I mean, it's only according to a bot, admittedly, seems to be just 8.0.1. And that's it. As if, that's going to include everything. Good evening, everyone. Jordan, Dude, and Fraser. So I guess that means that everything should be in it. It's just a case of tweaks, bug fixes, things like that. I don't know whether that means character copies will be in, though. Hi, Higpig. Because I obviously... someone was asking me last week, what was it? Oh, yeah, how to take positive action to get into the beta. And one of the things I was saying on Sunday was, well, at some point, lots of the big streamers and websites and stuff like that will get keys, beta keys to give away, as they increase the hype and all the rest of it. And then that literally happened the day later. So this week, those have been happening. In fact, Wowhead had a bit of a problem with so many people logging onto their site, desperate to get in. I think it caused some trouble. So they're doing the big beta waves, as in, giving thousands of them away, really, to various different people. I do note, Limit, someone from Limit was tweeting that they apparently are persona non grata at Blizzard because they noted that not only have they not been given any keys to give away, they were also not even really given access at the start of Alpha themselves on the friends and family list. And, as certain, senior players do, sort of have access, they can contact people at Blizzard directly. They're being basically ignored, they say. In fact, where was the tweet? It was, I retweeted it somewhere. Yes, so it says, we aren't on the list to give out beta keys anymore. Taken off friends and family list for early alpha. Blizzard contacts don't respond anymore. Banned as an example for all hardcore raiding. Took it decently gracefully. Wonder where we slipped up enough to fall out of their graces like this. Hi, Pinky. I'm fine, thanks. Limit has been banned so many times. It was, in the case of Hellier, very unfair, I felt. But, I went through all that at the time anyway. So, yes. But, yeah, so, I mean, the point is that anyone that's not in beta at the moment, there is now something people can do to take positive action to try and get themselves in. I mean, the chances are fairly slim, but when you look at, these people being given hundreds to give away, they don't have to give them away all at once, of course. They could portion it out over, I don't know what the terms are when people get these keys to give away. If it's supposed to be, they can do it, so many per session or something like that. Could be the RMT sales. Obviously, Blizzard are not very happy about that sort of behaviour either. But anyway, yeah. So for whatever reason, they don't get any giveaways. Method did. Method got a load to give away. I don't know if Exorcist did, because they're often not very pally with Blizzard the best of times. Wowhead did, of course, and I'm assuming the usuals will have done as well. They still have at least a few people who are talented, influential in their class. Well, they still have a lot of people like that because they're still a very competitive guild at the top end of things. You feel like they should have been onto at least... Yeah, well, they should have been. Again, it depends. I mean, if Blizzard are happy, you don't have to be in a very, top 10 guild necessarily to understand enough about the class to be able to test things out sensibly, of course. So if Blizzard are happy that there's enough people in there that know enough to be able to say sensible things, then, you know, they can still do it as a way of basically saying to Limit, we're not happy with you, which is obviously what has happened. It makes me sad in beta that the war campaign for the Alliance is bugged right now and you can't finish off a few of the quests. Hi guys. That's just the way it is with beta. That's just how it is. Things are bugged. But there is a new build going out, and it's, you know, it's good they're taking the servers down at some point. They might have even taken them down now. I don't know. For a couple of hours, they only just posted up there. So what do they say? We'll be bringing down the beta realms today in order to push a new 8.0.1 build. Again, like I say, it's not 8.0.1 point silly long number, which they usually are, implying that anything that comes after it is just going to be fixes rather than new content. No ETA for today's update, but I'll keep you in the loop on this thread if it looks like they're going to take longer than usual. And as a side note, as I say, it says it should address the disconnection issues. Well, they will, but there'll still be bugs going all the way up to it. I mean, if there were no bugs left in it now, they wouldn't need us to be testing it. There'd be no point at all. So there will be still stuff that's a bit wrong with it, and some of it might be fatally wrong with it. I suppose those would be higher priority. If it's preventing people, if it's like one quest is bugged, that's one thing. Is it bugged in a way that if you just relog it and do it again, will it work? In that case, it's lower priority. If it's bugged in a way that it's just permanently bugged and you've no chance of doing it, and it leads on to other things like a part of a quest chain, then higher priority, I suppose. How bad was the raid testing? It wasn't painful. I don't know what you're on about. It was. You know, you don't learn a great deal from that because I'll say, one, it was normal, so there weren't actually many real mechanics. Two, it wasn't like a guild. Well, it was partly guild and partly pug. And as I say, some of those pugs were very good because they were raiders themselves. But, I mean, the first boss highlighted exactly what the issue is with those and why I sort of said before when the other, you know, when the heroic stuff was being out there, I'm not just going to try and get myself into a pug because it's pointless. And the first boss highlighted it perfectly. We know how we want to do that boss when it goes live. We tried to do it that way, but everyone cocked it up because they weren't listening. So we had to abandon it just for the sake of killing the boss. And which means you're basically not learning anything. All we're doing is killing the boss. Well, it's normal mode. Of course we're going to kill the boss. You know, we've all... and actually, another thing that's happened in it, I don't think I showed about it in that video. I'm always very tired. I'm especially very tired on a Sunday morning. What was that? Oh, yeah. So I actually got a weapon drop from that first boss, and everyone's going, oh, you lucky bastard, blah, blah, blah. To which I had to point out, there's no point in me being lucky now. What matters is, am I going to get a weapon drop when I first kill that boss? To which the answer will probably be no. Actually, someone did actually get a loot drop off every boss that we killed, which was like all 5 of them. Whereas I just basically got that one. But it was a weapon, which is nice. I haven't actually tried using it, really. It's not a nice looking weapon. It looks horrendous, in fact. It looks like some crimpers. But anyway. I mean, that's something we're going to be getting used to again, having to get weapons. But all on personal loot. Alright. So we'll have to see how that goes as well. I'm also wondering at what point they're going to allow us to test the Zandalari Trolls and the Kulturans. Because... I mean, they don't necessarily have to let us test them during the beta because they're not supposed to be releasing in time for the start of BfA. So I suppose they might just be testable in a PTR later on. But given that they usually test stuff in beta that's intended for quite a while. I mean, in Legion, for example, even in the beta, we were testing Nighthold stuff. And that didn't come out for like half a year after it launched. at the same time, we didn't test Trial of Valor. That was a bit of a surprise. Nor did we test Karazhan. That was also a bit of a surprise. Although a smaller surprise than the Trial of Valor. Gun seems like quite an interesting boss. I didn't try that. Of course, because that was not one of the 5 that I could try. And I haven't watched any of the videos yet of other people doing them. I will at some point. But maybe, I'm thinking of just waiting till all the testing's been done so we can get the most up-to-date sort of looks at them. So, I mean, that's why I was saying in that video, I hadn't actually seen any footage of any of the bosses on any mode. So I had no idea what was going on with those bosses, other than what people had said. So, and also getting to grips with the idea that I don't have cheat death. That's a very different attitude now that I have. Because in Legion, I always sort of was okay with the fact that I don't really have defensives, because I have the safety net of the cheat death. Whereas now, it's a case of every time I think I might die, I'm thinking to myself, I probably ought to do something then. Because I can't just use bubble. Because then what happens the next time I might die, it's gone. I've used it up. So it's back to being how it used to. Well, no, worse than it used to, because it used to be the case that I actually had another defensive to use. I used to have divine protection. That's gone now. So, you know, Shield of Vengeance. I suppose Shield of Vengeance absorbs a bit more, but no more Soul Blight buffs. What's Soul Blight? What is that? I don't think Soul and Blight are words that belong together for a paladin. But on the issue of buffs, yes, it is looking very much like... Well, thank you, JD. It is very much looking like... classes are not going to get class buffs. You know, Blizzard, with great pomp and ceremony, said, we think it's important that all these classes get these things so that, you know... And the example they gave was, let's say you're putting a pug raid together and you've got one spot left and you've got all these people sign up and you haven't got a hunter. You should want to bring the hunter. To which I said, well, that's a bit shit. What if the hunter is appalling? You know. But that was their stance. No, they're all going to bring something that's unique that you're going to want. And then they haven't. They've done it for like fewer than half the classes. Speaking of which as well, you've failed. So anyone who tries to use certain words today won't be able to, because there were fewer than 20 that got the mailbox correct, by the way. There were a number of people who got it correct, but there were too few. So I've had to ban it again. But yeah. I don't know. I don't really know what there is now, because if this next patch is what is actually feature complete, and I know they said when it goes to beta, that's the point at which they say it's feature complete. I still feel I don't really know what to make of Islands or Warfronts, or even Mythic Plus Dungeons. Because what I want to get fixed in my head is, okay, I'm in a guild that has this raiding schedule, which is fine. But outside of that raiding schedule, what am I going to have to do to remain competitive at least a baseline cutting edge level? And I have no idea at all. None at all. Warfronts are looking boring. I was actually going to do a video on it based on my testing last week. I didn't get around to it. They are absolutely appalling. And I'm not talking about because of things with the bugs. Obviously, there were bugs in it. That wasn't an issue. There weren't actually that many. It actually went fairly well. But all you're doing is fetching and carrying. Blizzard had this master plan that Warfronts were basically like being in Warcraft 3, or like the RTS Warcraft games, But you, instead of being the overlord, the omnipotent god who was controlling everything, you were just one of the little guys. Well, that's fine until you realise that one of the little guys has a very boring life. You know, more wood. That is not fun. And that's what I was doing. In fact, I was the one who was kept going to the lumber mill to get more wood. That's all you were doing. You were going to a place to get a resource, bringing it back, making a thing. You know, I made a demolisher. Did I ride the demolisher and use the demolisher? No, I made the demolisher. The demolisher went off and did its own thing. The only interaction I had with that demolisher once I'd made it, and you can only make, it seemed to me you could only make 3 of them. Not you personally, but the whole group. So once the first 3 of us had made one, that was it. There weren't any, you couldn't make any others. All I could do after that was repair it by clicking on a barrel and then clicking on the demolisher when it was damaged. And then you went to another place and got a different resource and took that back. It was just going to different places, fighting some NPCs, and then turning resources. It was dull. It was absolutely appalling. Appalling. Put it this way, if the rewards do not compel me to go and do it, I'm not bothering. I'm really not bothering. The fantasy pictures for Warfronts was with the champion we used to go join the RTS. I'm not sure about champion. I think they just meant peasant or peon, because that's what it felt like. I honestly think they realise they're going to suck because I have not really seen them hyping them up. Well, I mean, Blizzard, I don't know to what extent they hype it up, because they don't need to. They let the community hype it up. It is certainly true to say that the community, as far as I can tell, have not been hyping it up. But the reason for that is because it's dull. It is tedious, in fact. I cannot even begin to understand what their plan for it is. The only way it's going to have good, I was going to say popular then, I think that ship has sailed. The only way they're going to have good take up on it is if there is some reward from it that you can't do without. You know, because it's also another thing you can note from it is it's going to be very low intensity. Anyone's going to be. It's like imagine, you know, you got various bits of content, and then you got LFR down there, and you can't even see the level at which Warfronts is. You just go in and do things, and things happen. So Warfronts is appalling. Warfronts is a huge... I'm not even going to say disappointment, because I wasn't excited for them. I'm not saying I was critical for them before I even knew what was going on with them. But it wasn't something that I thought, oh, I can't wait to see that. It was just something, well, I will see it when I see it. So I can't, in all honesty, say I've been disappointed. But it's not something to get excited about. The islands... I'm not keen on being forced to do islands even. Like multiple. We'll just have to see about that one. Hopefully you can get a few people together and do them fairly quickly. Because there's different difficulties of those at least. You don't really understand why they were developed without PvP in mind. Because then, I think I can understand it. I think the reason why they weren't developed with PvP in mind, which you look at it and you think, you know, because all it would be then is a battleground. What would there be? What would the difference be between Warfronts, as they are, and a battle? It would just be another Alterac Valley, except without capturing flags as such. Although there are flags to capture, it's just that you can't really fail to capture them because there aren't other players. Is it a good expansion to resub to? I suppose it depends what you want out of it. I'm not sure that it's not shaping up to have as many new features as Legion had, but then it does still have the features of Legion, minus the artifacts, but plus with the Azeroth traits, whether that's good or not. I mean, you've got war mode, if that interests some people. You've got the islands if that interests some people, but I think that could get old fairly quickly as well. I don't see islands being having as much longevity as say Mythic Plus Dungeons. So I'm not sure. I suppose it depends what you get out of the game and what you enjoy from the game. I mean, when you think, I mean, try and think about what is being hyped the most amongst various videos in the community. So the things that are being hyped the most are the storyline. Okay, that's getting a lot of attention. Allied races is getting a lot of attention. I think war mode is getting a fair bit of appreciation, but maybe on a lesser level than the storyline and allied races. Other than that, I don't know if other people have got a view on it. Other than that, I don't really see anything getting lots of, wow, this thing is happening from videos that I see in my feed. I don't see a lot of it. You know, all the videos I see that are like, are basically on stuff. Well, Personal Loot is getting a lot of discussion, but I don't think excitement. I know there are some people that like it, but it's not a big feature as such. It's just a change in game mechanics. You know, that's on the same level as a class redesign. It's something that some people are excited about, some people will be annoyed about, but it's not a wow factor of the new expansion. I mean, you know, when Blizzard do their thing where they're advertising the new expansion and they do the thing with the words that fly out at you, 10 more levels, hundreds of new quests, new zones, new islands to explore, all that stuff. You know, they're not going to put in one of those ever. Personal loot for everyone. Personal loot for you and for you and for you. They haven't got Oprah Winfrey to do an advert for that one. So, yeah, in terms of, you know, if you just look through, as I say, WoW videos where people have got a title that suggests, ooh, exciting things in here, it does tend to be on the lines of storyline and allied races. As far as I can tell, that's my perception at rate. I haven't conducted a detailed scientific study of every BFA related video, or even my own BFA related videos. Because apart from anything else, I tend to pick on the discussion points anyway, rather than that. So I don't do as many storyline based ones or casual feature based ones, unless it somehow affects more serious players. I mean, just case in point, you know, the war mode video I did yesterday, which I delayed for ages. The reason I delayed it is because I was thinking, right, I want to use that footage, and I kept thinking it's going to take me ages to find that footage that I know I want to use in it. And then eventually it got to last night, and I thought, do you know what, I just need to do it. Sod it, I'll just try and use footage as best I can. It doesn't matter that much. But yeah, that's already got like 81 comments on it. All right, some of them are mine, but that is above average for a video that's even been out for a week, and well above average for a video that's only been out for 24 hours. So war mode, I think, is one that some people are excited about, because I don't think it's hugely controversial as well. Like, you know, there's obviously topics that get a lot of discussion that are not necessarily big features. It's just they divide opinion, and therefore you get a lot of comments on those sort of videos. I don't think war mode really does divide opinion. I don't think there's anyone really against it. I can't think of any reason. I have seen a couple of comments, ironically, from people who say they enjoy World PvP being against it. I think that's literally a couple. I think most people are in favour of it. So you think war mode's been awesome so far, excited to the emergent gameplay that comes from it. I would say, curious to see the emergent gameplay, because it's quite difficult to predict how the community is going to react to it. because it can go one of several ways, really. And I think the behaviour that we see in the first week or two won't necessarily be the behaviour that will be there in a few weeks' time. So it will be interesting to see, because with a lot of very new features, when you get a sudden massive change to the game, you always get a lot of interest, people just trying it out of interest. And then the people who actually enjoy it will carry on doing it, and the people who don't tail down. You know, we've seen this all before. We saw it with changes to the PvP system, going from vanilla to TBC. There was a massive spike in the number of people doing PvP when they changed that system, and then it sort of died down to people who just like doing PvP. It'll get a lot easier once they introduce flying too. Easier in what way? You know, you can argue it can get easier to evade the death squads, but you could have flying death squads. You're around doing your stuff, and in swoop, like 5 hippogriffs with, you know, goblin rogues or something. It could get interesting. However, the only way, this is what I was trying to explain last night, the only way there'll be a difference between world PvP with war mode and world PvP as we have it now is if essentially the bulk of the people with war mode on are the ones who actually want to world PvP. That was why I was querying. I wasn't like criticizing. I was querying whether they should have added in benefits to PvE content, because when you get to the point where I am vocally opposed to world PvP in World of Warcraft, when you get to the point where I am thinking of using war mode, something's a bit questionable there. So imagine all the number of people that will do it that won't actually PvP. You know, when they come across another player, they won't attack them. And maybe the player they come across won't attack them back either. So, you know, because if it ends up where everyone just feels the rewards outweigh the tedium of engaging in PvP, you'll just end it with world like PvP servers like they are now. In which case you haven't really done anything other than give rewards for being out in the world. In fact, people actually saying that, oh, it's disappointing we haven't got any new talents. If everyone, oh, thank you, Crichton. If everyone uses war mode, or like everyone, like a large number of people use war mode, effectively we do get extra talents because we get to use our PvP talents. Only out in the world, obviously. We don't get to use them in raids or anything like that. Is AoE just going to hit the opposing faction with war mode on? Oh. I see no reason why not. Well, greater judgment will be gone anyway, but I know what you mean in terms of things that, you know, cleave onto other targets. I don't know, actually. Like, here's the problem. The problem is I'm not a PvP player. So when it comes to, like, world PvP, I don't necessarily always know how are the mechanics working. I know, for example, that your PvP talents are not really enabled unless you're actually engaged in some PvP. Which is why most of the time I don't even know what my PvP talents are set on in live, because they're no use to me. I don't care. But with war mode, I will set talents that are most useful for PvE. If I decide to turn it on, that is. On some classes, the extra talents make a huge difference. Your Destro lock is much nicer to play with the PvP talents. Well, at the moment, I haven't actually tried it out, I have to confess. But there is a PvP talent that's bugged for Retribution Paladins, which basically means you don't let anyone judge you twice. Because if I cast a judgment on someone, if I then use a judgment on that same mob or player or whatever, apparently it hits them for about 2,000% of their health. Which is probably a one-shot. I don't know whether it actually does that, or it's probably just a tooltip error and it probably doesn't do that at all. But if it does do what it says on the tooltip, then that would be interesting to say to it. Yeah, I didn't think it. I thought it was much more likely to be a tooltip error. But I didn't try it out. I didn't test it because, you know, what's the point? Because it's clearly not intended. Because otherwise, yeah, it would be a bit like when I used to duel warriors in TBC, particularly. Like, I've never really had a problem with one-on-one with warriors, even PvP warriors, but in TBC in particular, I remember there was a warrior in my guild who was one of the, there was like a co-GM thing going on, 2 GMs, and he used to keep wanting to duel me because he could never last more than a few seconds because it was quite simple. Back in, you know, then you had, I mean, was that then when things crit as well, like judgments crit if on a stun target or something? Can't remember. But basically I would stun them and then kill them within a few seconds. And it reminded me of that because, you know, it'd be like, judge it, you've got to kill me before I get that next judgment off, or that's it, you're finished. Which obviously is ridiculous. But yes, some of those talents would make it a lot easier. And the irony is, for leveling purposes, it's not that big a deal. But 15% extra experience from quests and killing mobs, which is basically how you get your experience, unless you do a dungeon. Obviously, it's not going to count in a dungeon. But how many dungeons do you realistically do when you're leveling up anyway? So, I mean, that would be a significant saving in time. If you wanted to, the problem is, as I kept saying, as soon as you get to level 120, you suddenly, and, you know, I don't know it's going to go like this when it goes live, but I think it will. You just become like a baby, a newborn kitten. You're weak, incredibly weak. You know, you go from, you know, grabbing 6 mobs, yeah, no problem, no problem. In fact, I might even have to go protection spec while I'm out soloing. But having the PvP talents should make you can either choose to be a bit more defensible, I suppose, or, you know, more powerful, more aggressive. Of course, it does mean, you know, finding extra keybinds for things that I'm not used to having. Stacks with rested. So the war mode, you're getting 215% from killing creatures. Oh, right, yeah. I'm less sure about the level cap bonuses, like the gold and artifact power. I'm probably not that bothered about that. But again, the talents are the big draw for me. If it was just the experience and then the gold and artifact power, I would think, not really worth it. It's not actually enough of an incentive. But the talents are something to seriously consider. You worry that you'll get used to using the PvP talents for questing and feel handicapped in raids and dungeons. Well, yeah, I mean, that could, I suppose, be a very realistic prospect indeed. Oh, MMO Champion have got some keys to give away as well. So it looks like at the moment there's thousands of keys all up for grabs. You just need to sort of follow the right people. I don't have any keys. What is my current opinion of Ret as it is now? So, dual opinion. 1, nice to play. I like the talents. I like the fact that the talents are useful in different situations. But 2, I'm not happy with, you know, if I'm thinking about it as someone, like what's happening at the moment, any competitive guild at the moment is trying to work out what their ideal roster will look like, class and spec wise. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, all right, guilds that currently have Ret Paladins are probably not going to be going, oh, well, we're not going to need them anymore. I don't think it's that bad. But at the same time, guilds who don't have one, or they have one that leaves, in other words, don't have one, I don't really see them going, oh, we need to replace our Ret Paladin. Because I don't see what utility we have, which is not very much even in Legion, has been nerfed. So what we have is nerfed, and we don't have anything extra. We've not had anything added. So, yeah, utility-wise, I'm not at all happy. So that's my opinion at the moment. I mean, cleaving-wise, obviously, that would be nerfed a bit for, like, 2-target, but we know that that's a deliberate decision, and that will affect most specs as well. So we know that when we're on 2 targets, unless we've got Divine Judgment, we can't just Divine Storm on them. But, you know, that's what that is. Oh, so they're doing Mythic Raid testing from tomorrow. Hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're doing 7 of the bosses Mythic Raid testing. I don't remember Mithrax. Was Mithrax the new boss? The one they added later or something? I don't think we'll get involved in those. I really don't see the point in trying to do mythic ones unless you've got an actual proper raid group with your guild. No point in plugging those buggers. Damage output, pointless even looking at damage output. The logs I had me about... It had me the highest melee DPS, but there were only a few melee DPS there. But there's so much variation due to... Like, I didn't have any UI because I just used standard UI, which not only is bad, but I'm not used to it. So, you know, and so I didn't play it well. I didn't necessarily use all the optimal talents. I was just trying things out. So it's difficult for me to say just based on my own logs. But also, you can look at it and you can think, there's some classes that are clearly overpowered at the moment. There are some that are underpowered. The classes haven't been finished, so there's no tuning yet. They're not even really trying to keep a lid on tuning. They don't want it to go silly one way or the other. I mean, they can't let it be too weak because they need you to be able to kill things to level up. They can't let it be too strong because they don't want you one-shotting everything. But within fairly wide boundaries, they're not doing anything about it at the moment. When they finish basically tuning is something that will happen after it launches, or the final tuning anyway. They will increasingly, as it gets to launch date, tweak things. But the tuning always, for the last few expansions at least, has always happened after the raid testing. So it's very impossible to say how our damage is going to look. If you're thinking to yourself, basically, as I have thought in my darkest moments, I'm going to justify my position based purely on my damage output, I don't know. You'd be in favour of raid-wide Greater Blessings coming back. Well, I would if they were decent. You don't want them to be overpowered, of course, but decent. The rotation is not the same as Legion. It has a number of similarities, but it is not the same. In fact, actually, that's what annoyed me. This time last week, I think it was, I was actually quite annoyed because someone was looking up, as they do, it's their hobby, I think, Skeletor's hobby, to look up anyone who does a video on Retribution Paladins, basically. Because you get an awful lot of people going, oh, you know, I'll try and get a few cheeky views and build up my channel by posting some shite on YouTube. Some of them just blatantly copy it off elsewhere. Some of them don't even do that. It's actually worse when they don't even do that, because then it's a load of shit. And we're looking at one particular video that was saying like, oh, it's basically the same as Legion. It's like, no, it's not. It's almost on the level of Icy Veins when they did their first Ret Paladin guide for Legion. It was written by 2 people who don't play Ret Paladins, and it wasn't just bad, it was completely wrong. They were basically writing about Warlords of Draenor Ret. It was clearly someone that had gone on in early alpha and written their guide based on how it was then, before all the changes. So, is that sort of level of things. But the rotation is not the same. I mean, there's certain similarities. You're still building holy power to spend holy power. And Judgment still applies a debuff. But there really the similarities end. Even the start, like your opener, I need to have like Soul Sacred I know has come up with an APL that he reckons is going to be the way to go. So I haven't actually read through it. I need to read through it at some point. Because that's another thing. I was doing my opening in a particular way on the raid. But I hope that's not the opener we're going to want to do, because it felt extremely clunky. However, I will say this. I think Blood Elves could have a much tidier time of it. I think the Arcane Torrent could come into its own. But that's not an option for me. So, but anyway, there you go. I mean, that's that one. But some classes, I mean, at least we've got our talents. Some classes haven't even got their talents yet. So they can't be tuned. I think our mages in the raid were all going Arcane. And kicking the shit out of the damage meters. But I'm trying to let me think. Let's get the logs up again so that I can actually remind myself. Because the other thing to bear in mind as well, some of the players that were in that raid haven't actually really played the beta either. You know, they've just created a character specifically for that raid. Now, obviously, they're not going to perform as well because they haven't really even tried out the class. Oh no, what am I doing? I remember that's the point. Yeah, I actually logged the raids, but mine didn't work. I don't know why. So I need to get someone else's logs. Hold on, where are they? Oh yeah, they didn't put them in the raiding channel. I remember now. Someone's trying to bait me as well by trying to get me to watch that thing Wowhead have done on the new gnomes thing. This again, a suggestion, the weekly suggestion that there might be a new form of gnome as an allied race. Although the issue with that is I'm not actually bothered about that because it sounds like it'd be a mechanical gnome, and I keep saying I've no issue with mechanical gnomes. Oh, there they are. Were able to see any of the Azerite armor that dropped from the raid? Well, a few people did get some, but I didn't know them, so I wasn't able to ask, well, I didn't ask, I should say, if the Azerite traits were visible on it. However, the fact that I have not seen, I've seen data mined traits, but I don't necessarily know they're attached to the raid. But I haven't actually seen anyone posting anything. I mean, if there were Azerite pieces actually dropping with their traits from that raid, I'm pretty sure someone would have posted something on Reddit, and I haven't seen anything there, so I'm guessing that's not the case. If I look at Fetid Devourer, because that was such a simple boss, no one had to do any thinking at all on that boss. So let me just see. So oh hello. In terms of the way the damage was working on that, damage done. So we had 2 arcane mages way at the top, like massively at the top. Then we had a frost mage, significantly behind them. Then we had 3 demonology warlocks. Then we had me. In fact, actually, I'll post a link in here so you can see for yourself. Then there was a Shadow Priest. Then there was an Arcane Mage, who I'm guessing is a gnome because they did significantly less than the other Arcane Mages. But more likely what the case was that they were someone who haven't actually played that spec in the beta and therefore hadn't set everything up. They didn't know what they were doing. Then Enhancement Shaman. Then another Ret. Then another Enhancement Shaman, who is an alt of someone who usually plays a mage, I have to say. then another Shadow Priest, and then a Frost DK who was doing less than a Blood DK. I'm guessing that's probably not supposed to happen. Although, it's not impossible. I remember it when they started Warlords of Draenor raid testing, where I actually did do proper raid testing, because the guild I was in at the time did raid testing. Although I did those early raid tests as Ret, Protection Paladins were doing way more damage. But again, you know, that's before they're doing the tuning. And it used to do my head in. It used to annoy the hell out of me that we were doing these raid tests before classes had been even come close. You don't expect it to be exactly right, because apart from anything else, the raid tests will help inform it. But the fact that they hadn't even attempted to tune the classes before they did the raid test, but I suppose that's just the nature of it. What's best guess at the DPS come the end of expansion? What, as a number? I have no idea. I don't even know what my DPS is now. Hold on, what is it? So on that particular fight, which was largely a single target fight, there wasn't much cleaving to be done. What was my overall DPS? My overall, and this again is me not necessarily playing brilliantly either, was just over 5,000. Over 5,000 DPS. Although that was very low active time. I think there was something wrong with this log. Oh, there was something wrong with this log. Hold on, I need to change it. That's right, that encounter never ended. There was a bug. So, hold on, I need to actually... So, that's better. No, my actual DPS, sorry, was 8.9 thousand. So, that's where it is. I think we were boosted to item level 330. But I can't remember where that is in relation to the gear you get from those raids. I haven't really got all the item levels in my mind yet, because it's not really worth doing it just yet. So yeah, I'd forgotten about that actually. There were a couple of weird bugs. So there was that fight that never ended. The only way we could get out of the room, because the room doesn't open up again until you kill the boss, which we killed the boss, but the encounter didn't end, was to all basically teleport out and then back into the raid. Our fear was that if we did that, it might reset all the bosses, but it didn't. It was okay. But what it meant was that there's these ads that keep spawning, and they kept, and you got a message on it from DBM, and it kept spawning all the way through the fights that we were doing after that as well, although fortunately not in our room. And then the next boss we did, which was Vectis. You know, you get a debuff from it, which wasn't resetting on death. And, you know, so the only way to reset that was actually to leave the instance and come back in. So I still had the debuff from the previous boss when I was doing the last boss that we were testing, because it didn't actually matter. The debuff meant you took extra nature damage, but the next boss we were doing didn't do nature damage, it did like shadow damage. So I couldn't be bothered to go out and back in again. Initial impression of the encounters. As normal encounters go, so okay, let's go through them. Talok has some interest. As a first boss, it's okay, yeah, it's decent. I think it's decent. Mother, on normal mode, I don't think has much real potential for fun, but I can see how, I haven't looked at the mechanics for later difficulties, but I can see how that one could be interesting. It has some similarities with Sisters of the Moon in terms of that controlled movement across boundaries. Fetid Devourer is just crap, on normal at least. It's just take as much range as you can, DPS the ads. You know, kill the boss when you're not DPSing the ads. Hi, Echoes. Vectis, which is not the fourth one listed, but it's the fourth one we did, is not a very enjoyable boss, on normal at any rate. Although I can see Pugs having difficulties with it. but maybe not. Maybe they won't. But the last one that we tested, Voknus, or no, can't remember its name. Herald of Unzoth was its actual title. That's what I remember. That was more interesting. I liked that boss. That was okay. And again, an absolute pug wiper. You only need, in fact, it showed us, you only need one person not listening. Because like some bosses, some raid bosses, like you can get into a normal pug and people go, make sure you've read up on the bosses. And a lot of people, as long as they've got a brain about them, you can just go, well, I've done raids before. I know most of the way these things work. And you can, unless you're the tank, you can generally wing it. So if you're just a bog standard DPS or healer, you've not got any special job to do, you can usually wing it. You can get away with it. It's fine. That fight, not the case. Because if you do what someone in our party did, which was the other Ret actually, they embarrassed our class. And they dropped the cloud. Instead of running as far away from the boss as they could get with it, they dropped it right onto the boss and wiped us all. Instantly. Nothing you can do about it. We're just going to wipe everyone. The only thing I suppose you could do if you saw someone do that was to run the boss to the other side of the room. The problem would be that person could easily just clip the cloud themselves because they've dropped it there, and you're still going to spawn the ads and wipe. So, yeah, there are some bosses in there. I'm looking at it. Even for normal mechanics, I can see causing pugs some difficulties. But I don't see any of them being problematic for an organised guild raid that makes it clear to everyone what they need to do. But it's normal. I mean, you don't expect that. The main thing to be thinking about will be which bosses to coin. Because, you already have a situation where if you're going to expect to do it on normal and heroic, you coin the heroic ones. Generally do heroic first. But, it's a case of, well, do you favour the Azeroth trait pieces or the trinkets or the weapons? I suppose we'll have to wait and see for them all to be finished yet, because even the loot that drops in that raid hasn't obviously been finished yet. So it might be a bit curious as to even which bosses you decide to coin on when you expect to kill them all in the first week, that is. And if you expect to progress through them, then okay, not so much of an issue. I also wonder how many coins we're going to end up getting, because if you think about it, in Legion, we had a lot of access to coins. Very rarely have we only ever had 3 coins, because there's usually, or very often anyway, other ways to get them, because like and if anyone hasn't done this yet, you need to get over there because it'll be finished soon. But the thingy tower, what's it called, on the Broken Shore is, it's that long since I've paid any attention to the Broken Shore. I can't even remember the name of the tower. Not the Mage Tower, the other tower that gives you the free seals. That's on at the moment. So I've got myself 3 free seals for the next Nether Disruptor. Thank you very much, Action Man. So that, and actually now that I think about it, it's not even a tower, is it? It's basically a pool. So yeah, Nether Disruptor, that's what I was actually thinking of. I was trying to think of Nether Storm Tower, and I think, Nether Storm's a zone. It's not that. But anyway, yeah. So I've got my 3 free coins from that. I also got a mission thingy. So I've got an extra coin from that. So at the moment, even though I used to pull my coins this week, I've got 4 coins ready to go. And obviously tomorrow, when it resets, I can pick up an extra 3. So I can have 7 coins to use this week. Once a month you get a time walking, which gives you, if you do the time walking dungeons. I actually didn't last time, I have to confess. But if we were still progressing, then I would. So once a month you're going to get one of those. About 3 times a month, if you're on with your missions, you don't leave them lying around. You can get a coin from your missions. So let's say each month you can get 4 from that. And I don't know how often, on average, the Nether Disruptor comes up with that thing. But let's say that's an average of once a month as well. So that means, on average, each month, you can get an additional, 7 coins on top of your 3 a week. So you can get quite a few coins. Whereas maybe in the next expansion, the only source of coins, because they won't have a nether disruptor, maybe it's just going to be from time walking and then your normal ones. Have I been experimenting with war mode? No, I haven't. I've looked at the talents, and I have thought about it. I probably will. I think what I'll probably do, just to try it out, is when we can do character copies, I will want, even though I've got now a paladin at level cap, which now has a raid weapon, so it's probably going to be superior to anything I do on my normal paladin. But I'd still like to do the character copy on my paladin and level it up, just to see how it feels with the raid gear and the legendaries and all the rest of it. But I might just abandon it at level cap and carry on with the dwarf. I don't know, we'll see. But I might well try that out on war mode. Are the talents the same as Legion? I can't swear that they're the same as Legion. I think a few of them have been tweaked, but they seem to be the same ones as in Legion, albeit with the occasional tweak, maybe. The way it works with your talents, like there's the first row that has that crowd control release row, doesn't it? So your top row for everyone is you've either got the choice of an ability that breaks you out of CC or one that breaks you out of it after so much time or something like that. But you've got a choice of 3. That's still there. You've still got that choice of 3. And then you can pick another 3 PvP talents from all the rest. So it's not down in like tiers as it is in Legion. It's basically choose from the top row as it is in Legion for your first one. And then your next 3 are just 3 from all the rest. So you get a lot more choice, a lot more scope for combinations. And there are some of the ones there that are, that will be quite nice, as I say, for dealing with NPCs. But whether it will be worth it if you've got death squads running around, I'm not so sure. So all I can think is, given that the expansion comes out 2 weeks before I go back to work, unless something crops up, some emergency crops up, or some unforeseen event that I have to prioritize ahead of it, then I can level up on the first day, which means that I can take war mode, have no negative consequences, other than maybe leveling too quickly, if that's going to be a thing. But the jury's still out for me on that one. Knowing that I'm not going to come across any enemy players, and certainly not roving death squads. Do I feel more excited about BfA than I did when we first got alpha access? No, less excited. Which is a bit grim, isn't it? No, I'm less excited. But the reason I'm less excited is not because I think the expansion's disappointing. It's a totally different reason. Like I said before, World of Warcraft for me does 2 things well. The leveling experience is good. It's even good doing it. Like people will say, oh, I don't want to do the leveling. Some people will say, I don't want to do the leveling up because I don't want things spoiled for me. Fair enough. Some people will say, I don't want to do the leveling up on beta because then I'll be sick of it when I have to do it for live. I have never. Every time I've been, which betas I've been in? I've been in Wrath of the Lich King, Mists of Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor, Legion, and now Battle for Azeroth. So that's 5 betas that I've been in. And in all cases, I've been in fairly early on. So I've had a good long go at it. And every time I've leveled up multiple characters multiple times. So I've done a lot of leveling. I have never been bored of leveling when it's come out live. Because it's a different experience. But also because I think, it is enjoyable for a few times, for me anyway. I tend only to get bored after the 5th or 6th alt that I level up. Then I start to get a bit weary of it. But the other thing I live for is raiding. I have a lot of trepidation about the raiding for various reasons, which I can go over in a minute, but I just see some comments have come up. It says, you made a really good point about possibly leveling too quickly due to how gimped you can feel at max level. Well, yeah, that is my worry. It's not guaranteed to be a problem. The issue is this. In beta, so the only character I've so far leveled up to 120 since it's been beta, I completed 2 of the zones. I did a few quests in the 3rd zone. Not very many. I spent like half an hour in it and then dinged 120. Then I did the quests in the opposite faction zones, which doesn't take you that long, by the way. It's the equivalent of doing the Suramar starter quests. Only there's like 3 lots of them. And then I was able to activate world quests. So I had the rep for it. But I noticed the reps I've got were all at the time friendly for everything. Now, I was a bit suspicious of that because I'm thinking to myself, why were they all at the low end of friendly when I've done 2 zones in their entirety, or almost in their entirety, and 1 zone hardly any at all? So I'm thinking that we've basically been gifted the rep we need for world quests in beta to allow us to access world quests easily. And I worry that when it goes live, that we're going to have to complete quest lines, major quest lines in all of our own faction zones. And if that's the case, there is a serious danger of still having to do that at level cap. If you find yourself as an Alliance player needing to do quests in Kulturas, or as a Horde player needing to do quests in Zandalar, then I think you're going to lose more time than you gained by taking war mode. That's my opinion. But there is an if there, because I don't know whether that's the case or not. I'd quite like Blizzard to answer that question. The problem is, even if they do another Q&A before it goes live or becomes apparent, it'd be quite difficult for me to phrase that question concisely and still get the unambiguous meaning across. The main thing you're disappointed about is that I highly doubt there's going to be any significant shifts in the power structure of the Alliance and the Horde. Well, they can't afford there to be. What I'm curious about is what have Blizzard got in mind whereby they need... Because basically now what we've got... Well, not now, but when BfA launches, the situation will be the whole of Kalimdor is... All right, there's some neutral areas in both. But effectively, there are no Alliance areas in Kalimdor apart from one little island. There are no Horde areas in the Eastern Kingdoms apart from one little section up north. That's it. So effectively, they're making the Alliance and the Horde have their own continents. Why? What's that about? I'm curious about that. Not excited, just curious. Blizzard's been trying to phase out the questing is for leveling mentality, it seems to be. Yes, JD, I agree. I said that basically in Legion because the Suramar thing, you know, remember in Suramar you couldn't actually do it until level cap. And I have this same thing. You know, we've have this association in World of Warcraft, which I think is not a good thing, where we associate leveling with questing to the point where in previous expansions, some previous expansions, you know, you've got to level cap and then it's right, let's get rid of all these quests, don't need them anymore. Apart from maybe the main quest line, because like in TBC you had a fairly lengthy quest line that led all the way up to Black Temple and you know, into that. And of course the one for Karazhan as well. But generally speaking, the other quests, you can just abandon them. Why would you do them? All you're going to get is a bit of gold. The gear was no use to you. So all it was useful was a bit of, because you got the extra gold to compensate for the fact there was no longer rewarding experience. That was it. That was all there was to it. It was just gold. And not that much gold. Not really worth it amount of gold either. So, you know, I think they need to drop that. It's very difficult though, because it's so ingrained. Whereas, say, you know, some other games, Elder Scrolls Online, Star Wars The Old Republic, Lord of the Rings Online, the questing is not so strongly tied to the concept of leveling because they are much more story-driven games. I think World of Warcraft, where it fundamentally differs from those games, but you have to bear in mind this perception on my part, because I am a serious World of Warcraft player, sort of, and I'm a very casual player of the other MMOs. But my perception is that those other 3 games I've just mentioned are more story-driven, and World of Warcraft is more loot-driven. World of Warcraft rewards us with loot. The carrot it dangles is loot, not storyline. Even though there is a storyline. But, you know, that's just something to frame the questing, the dungeons, and the raids together. But what we ultimately see as the prize from those things, we see as the prize for quests getting XP, and the prize for dungeons and raids as being gear. Do I think WoW will ever allow city capturing or small town capturing? Horde or Alliance could take a hub and hold it, like how Tolbrad and Wintergrass worked out. I can see that. I've seen it in other games, so there's no reason not to foresee a point at which they do that. Hi, Miss Out. I mean, it worked quite well. If anyone's ever played Warhammer Online, you know, so what happened in Warhammer Online, which for PvP was really good. In fact, I am so glad I played Warhammer Online, because that's a lot of times I've said Warhammer Online there. Because before I played it, I thought I didn't like PvP in MMOs. Because I've done PvP, I thought I had an inherent dislike of large-scale PvP. Because my experience of it was World of Warcraft, and I didn't enjoy it. Whereas I'd done smaller scale PvP in games before it, like Doom, for example, and other like similar games, and that was fun. Or RTSs, Warcraft included, of course. You know, player versus player or Civilization, we can have multiple players. Warcraft 3, indeed, you could have multiple players. So I didn't think I liked it, and then I played Warhammer Online, and it was fantastic. And I'd quit World of Warcraft at the time because I'd actually got, of course, I was a Warhammer player, which you might be seeing more of on the channel actually in the near future, because I've been getting all nostalgic over it, and then found out that Games Workshop have killed it off. But never mind. I might ramble on a little bit here, sorry. But so I got Warhammer Online as soon as it came out, played it, full of bugs, load of shit. I thought, but I was still playing World of Warcraft at the time, so I didn't really give it a fair crack. Then I quit World of Warcraft in Wrath and went back to it. And I thought, and I properly got into it. It was still crap leveling and stuff like that. But then I got into a guild and was doing PvP. It was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Amazing. But the point is, so you had within it was all weird, but basically there were objectives to capture. And if you captured all of the objectives in a particular region, then you could assault the city, the enemy faction city. And it was a proper assault as well. If you happened to be that enemy faction and you were in the city, you got ported out, you know, and it turned into siege mode. So then there was a defense and for the attackers, the aim was to get in, obviously kick the shit out of a load of enemy players, but you also had bosses and stuff like that, from which you could, so the best gear you could get, you had to kill those bosses. They were the ones who dropped it. So you could get gear from getting renowned, which is like honor points in that system, up to a point. But the very best gear, which was not that difficult the very best gear wasn't like for the very top players in the world. I had it. But you got that from killing those bosses. So that was a system that worked really well. And yeah, I can absolutely see it working in World of Warcraft. That might be a different thing to saying I can see Blizzard doing it, because I'm not so sure. But yeah, actually having the city effectively, would you have to have it instanced? You might not have. I think you would have to have it instanced, because I think if you're going to do a proper city siege, you need certain parts of it to be like on fire and stuff like that, and walls having been, gates broken through with battering rams and stuff. So I think there would need to be an instanced form of it. But maybe there's a portal somewhere in the city and you get a warning going, the city's under attack, and you look around and go, no, it's not. But in actual fact, what you do is you go through the portal and you're into the instanced version of it where it is under attack. Maybe that would work. I don't know. I'll have to have a think about that. And you meant more in the open world, non-phased instances. Oh, so you mean just people doing invasions? Oh, cities pop up, you can attack during certain periods. I'm not sure about that. Maybe. Yes, actually, yeah, Warfronts are Blizzard's interpretation of it. They may be, actually. That could well be Blizzard's interpretation of it. Or maybe Warfronts are something they're wanting to try out. Maybe they're just wanting to try out the technology and the ideas. And maybe they're going to come later on the expansion with a proper city siege, maybe. You know, you never know. Quite a lot of the time when Blizzard introduce a new thing, it's not the end product. It's just their first tentative steps to try something out before they do it on a grander scale. So Warfronts could be the herald of something that's actually good. Some servers would be incredibly one-sided. It can still be sharded. I mean, obviously role-playing servers, different thing. You know, but they're just awkward. I suppose I should say we're just awkward now on our RP realm. But for the non-RP realms, it's all in shards anyway. It's quite easy to balance Horde and Alliance, even in World PvP. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. Hi, Leatrin. How does everyone feel about Lightbound Orcs? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Every week there's some nonsense, isn't there? Every week some nonsense. Hi, Aris. I have tried Warfronts. I tried them last week. I didn't do a video on it because unfortunately, or in fact, if you thought I sounded bored on the raid video, which I didn't at all, or at least I wasn't bored, I would have been on the Warfronts. My Warfronts video, if I'd have done it, and the only reason I didn't, because I was intending to, the only reason I didn't do it is because it suddenly shifted down the priority list when there's a load of other videos I needed to do. So, but what it would have gone something like this. So first of all, we wait around for ages before anything happens on an airship. Then you jump off the airship and parachute down. Then you kill a thing and go and collect wood. Then you turn the wood in. Then you go and kill another thing and collect some iron and you turn the iron in. Then you realise you need more wood, so you go back and find more wood. You don't really kill anything because you're just farming wood. And then you go and turn it in and you make a demolisher. Ah, do we get to ride the demolisher? No, we don't. The demolisher just goes off and does its own thing. So then what we do is we go to another place and farm something else and bring it back. And that's basically Warfronts. It's going to a place. If there's anything there to kill, we kill it. And if there isn't anything there to kill, we collect stuff. And then we take it back. And we keep doing that until we've opened up all the buildings, at which point we, and when I say we, what I actually mean is all the NPCs over which we have no control, launch an assault on the main enemy encampment, and we win. And then we loot a chest. That's Warfronts, basically, in a nutshell. That is actually my experience of Warfronts. But they're not always available. They're only available at certain times on the beta, so they've done it twice now. The first time it didn't really work too well to begin with, so that's the second time. When you go into war mode, do you want just fighting people on your... Didn't seem to finish that sentence there. Complete meltdown, light-bound high elves, please. This is it every time. Every time an NPC, like, you know, comes onto the thing. And where was the... In fact, where's the meme? Where is it? This is... I need to put it back up. There we go. That's how it is now. That's it. Yes. This unfortunately is how it is now. This is what I mean about maybe the problem is that there isn't enough to get excited about in Battle for Azeroth. I'm not saying it's going to be a bad expansion. I can't think of anything to specifically criticise about it, so I'm not saying that. But whenever you see the videos hyping things up, the two things they're hyping is story, like I've said before, storyline and allied races. Every time a new race, or not even a new race, just a race that we can't already play, says a thing, all of a sudden that's going to be the new allied race. If we get a genuine talking Murloc, that'll be another allied race. You know, if we're to believe all these things, I mean, I know some of them are very likely to be true because, you know, we're going to get new allied races. But if they're all to be believed, we're going to be getting an extra 20 allied races in the next expansion. You know, allied races galore. I shudder to think how they're even going to pretend to try and do all the racials and balance them. You wish they made those modes more dynamic and not so static. Go collect this, build that. What if we just wanted to raid something with peons and steal their hut and their siege weapons? Ah, well, there is a quest you can get. Do you know, it's a bit like, you know when you do Alterac Valley for the first time and there's that quest to go into that cave and steal that banner with the harpies in it? And when you do it, you're of neither use nor ornament. You're not helping at all. It doesn't do any good at all. But you're doing it for the quest, for the trinket. There's something like that in the Warfronts. I remember people in my guild who we'd made a group. And someone was saying, what's everyone doing over there? There's nothing over there. And I had to point out, there is something over there. There's basically a quest where you're supposed to go into like people's houses and steal things. Like, I don't know, it's like some foodstuffs, basically. There's a cheese wheel. I remember the cheese wheel because I like cheese. I think there might be some beer in one of them as well. But basically, you go to a place and steal food and drink and bring it back. And you get a buff, you know. So it's... But you're not getting resources that are helping towards the war effort. So it's got one of those things as well. So yes, you do steal from peasants or peons. People do love customizations, and I wish Blizzard would realise that and put more in. I can understand people getting excited about the concept of certain allied races, certainly. But what I mean is that, you know, I wonder if people are so starved of excitement that every time a thing appears, you know, oh, it's going to be an allied race. They can't all be allied races. I mean, already we know about 8. We've got 4 allied races access. Although technically, you can only play those allied races if you've bought the advance order for Battle for Azeroth anyway. So they're still tied to Battle for Azeroth. And then we know, obviously, there's another 4 coming. So that's already 8 allied races. So there might be another 4 to 8 in BfA at some point. I don't know. Next allied race, Lightforged Murlocs. Oh, I would play a Murloc. I think it would be a very bad idea because I don't think they're... I know they've got casters. I've never been able to reconcile this myself either, actually. I know they've got casters, but they're not considered really very intelligent. So I'm not really sure I get that. But they do lack intelligence. And so, for the same reasons you can't have gnome paladins, you can't realistically have Murloc paladins either. Pygmy Tauren. Wouldn't that just be a baby Tauren? You know, maybe that's what they could do for the next round of allied races. Instead of, you know, a bit like Muppet Babies, where you just have the young versions of all these things. I mean, yeah. I don't actually know ultimately where allied races are going to go. I mean, the thing is, people have got so excited about the allied races, they've forgotten that you can actually have new actual races. You know, the allied races are just basically different versions of races we can already play. All of them. But there could still be new allied races. You know, the new races we could possibly get. You know, you've got like the Vulpera, you've got, oh, please no. You've got those snake guys. The snake guys are nice, actually. There's the Tortollans. You know, if you want some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action going on. Lore-wise, as far as you know, Murlocs do lack intelligence but worship whatever most powerful they can find. And if that gets killed by someone, they worship that instead. You're making them sound like minions. That's the story of the minions, isn't it? Swarm around the biggest villain they can find, and when it's killed, go in search of another big villain. Oh, Tuskar. Yes. I mean, they could, of course. There's nothing to stop them. I mean, that would have to be a new race, not just... Because obviously we don't have those. But that would have to be... I mean, there is a precedent for bringing back races that aren't really relevant anymore. Because the Magar Orcs, all right, they're going to have a storyline to make them relevant. But they don't naturally fit in with the BfA storyline. So there's no reason why they can't do something similar with Tuskar. The only thing that would concern me with that is they're sort of more Arctic. And both Kulturas and... well, Zandalar's positively tropical, really. Kulturas is sort of a bit more temperate, but it's certainly not Arctic. So I'm not sure Tuskar would be it. But then, who knows where we're going next expansion? If there is a next expansion. I think we're getting to the age now of World of Warcraft where it's a bit like being elderly. You know, you might look forward to your next Christmas, but you keep wondering, are you going to see it? You know, we look forward to what they're going to do in the next expansion. And there's every reason to believe there will be another expansion. But at some point, there won't be. Do female Tuskars exist? I speaking as a scientist, I'm pretty sure there will be. Whether I can specifically remember a female one, or whether you could even tell the difference, I don't know. I don't think I could confidently tell the difference between a male and female seal anyway. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert. So as an example, High Elves. Yeah, but Blizzard already said they're not doing that. Of course, they can change their mind. There's lots of things they say they'll never do and then they do it. Or things that, yeah, they're definitely going to do and then they don't do it. How do I feel about Tortollans? They have very bad puns. They are terrible. I shudder to think what their jokes would be. Why would the Tuskar necessarily be alliance? Would they? We don't know that the female wouldn't have tusks. I don't know. I'll have to go back to Northrend now and have a look. I suppose they are more similar to a walrus. Do I think they'll ever make a sequel? Hang on, a sequel to what? Or do you think they will keep this up while putting out Classic and be content with that? A sequel to what? Sorry. Hold on. Oh, I missed something. And we still haven't heard anything new on the Classic WoW front. I'm pretty sure the team has been assembled. They've certainly had time to assemble it. Oh, to WoW. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, there's two certainties. One is that World of Warcraft cannot go for... I don't know about World of Warcraft 2. I don't know about that. Ironically, I did actually do a video on it. There's a bit of a rambling one and it talked about other things as well. But I did actually do a video on it this weekend, but it was for Patreon. Which I don't know if I'm actually going to put it on YouTube or not. I don't know if it's the sort of thing... I was saying actually to the patrons, I don't know if it's the sort of thing that really suits the channel because it was weird. But anyway, the upshot of it is that I have a fear that they won't do another... And I've said it before, actually. I don't see how they can do another Warcraft MMO. At least not directly following on. It's not impossible, but I just don't. I can't imagine the sequence of events that would sensibly lead to it. But of course, there are two things that are certain. One is that World of Warcraft cannot go on forever. That being said, I also described it in that video as the Hubble Space Telescope of games. It has gone on way beyond most people thought of, and it still continues to go on long after people thought it should have died out. It breaks all the rules of how long an MMO can last. And you could argue as a result of it is dragging others with it. I mean, Lord of the Rings Online is not that much younger, if we can put it like that, than World of Warcraft. And that's still going. I would hardly say it's still going strong, but it is still going. They haven't even let a silly thing like completed the story get in their way. You know, a Mordor expansion came out last summer, where the first quest was basically to assault the Black Gates and then rescue Frodo after he's destroyed the ring. And that's the start of the expansion. You haven't even gained a level after that. In fact, I think that might have been before that expansion, in fact. That actually might have been before it. So, yeah. But anyway, World of Warcraft could go for some time, but it has to end at some point. But the other thing is, Blizzard are not going to let the Warcraft franchise die out. There will be another Warcraft game. My fear is that it's a bloody mobile game. Alternate universe. Alternate universe is shite. Everything about... The only time alternate universe can ever be done well, and even then it's sometimes more miss than hit, is in Doctor Who. Every other situation, it's horseshit. Right? The new Star Trek films are horseshit because of the alternate universe thing. If they'd have actually done an origin stories of Star Trek, I'm sure it would have been fantastic. But no, they went with the alternate universe crap. Every time anyone does alternate universe, it's crap. It was the same with Warlords of Draenor, but they mixed it in with time travel as well. That's really bad. Alternate universe and time travel. I do tell a lie, actually. No, there was another situation where it went well, and that's Back to the Future 2. That worked as well. That was okay. Would a sequel let us keep our characters? No, absolutely not. If it's going to be a new game, it has to be a new game. Has to be. The most they could ever do, right? The most they could do is if you have certain achievements from the original game, maybe you get a few special achievements in the new game if you link it to the same email address or something like that, let's say. Or Battle.net, because obviously the new game would just still go on Battle.net, presumably. So maybe there's some achievements that, you know, and maybe some cosmetic rewards that highlight that. But ultimately, they cannot let you... The character has to be... The character at the start of every MMO has to be guy who, like, found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time and starts their life as an adventurer. You can't start off as conqueror of the universe. There's really nowhere to go from there. And we're very close to being conqueror of the universe. We've already conquered worlds and world beings. There isn't really many ways to improve on that. Maybe a mobile game would be perfect for us when we're all in nursing homes. No. I will be I was having a discussion in one of my classes. We have weird discussions with some of my classes at college today about death. And some of them were talking about what they'd like at their funeral and things like that. And other people were saying, but, you know, you won't, you know, it's, you're dead. You're the least important person at a funeral because it doesn't matter. You don't care. And I was saying, actually, when I die, I would like for them to harvest my organs if any of them actually still work, and then to throw the rest of me in a pit of ravenous dogs so that I can go to some good use. Because I don't really want to be hidden in the ground because that's just a waste of space. I don't want to be burnt because that's just adding greenhouse gases for no good reason. So I'd rather be ripped apart by dogs after anything usable has been extracted from me. Why have I? Oh yeah, the nursing home. So yes, I will be in that situation before I ever play a mobile game. I absolutely deplore the concept of playing a game on a mobile. Just the whole. No. You always wanted a Diablo MMO. Well, that is a more realistic possibility, I guess, that they do another MMO based on another franchise. I'd rather it were Diablo than, say, StarCraft. Not because I think there's more scope in Diablo, but just because I have this weird thing that I don't like sci-fi games. Don't like them. Don't know why. I just don't. They don't do anything for me. You actually legit miss being the no-name hero by chance adventurer. So do a lot of people. I know a lot of people are very, very upset that we are this big important character now. And people preferred that we were basically the wandering hobo that just comes into town, saves everyone, and then off we go, and it's like, ooh, who was that masked man? You can only be the no-name adventurer for so long. Not true. Because unless someone, I know we have selfie cameras now, but I don't think cameras are common in the Warcraft universe or even on Azeroth. So unless they're going to take pictures of you or, because you know how it is in like medieval type times when role players are supposed to be set sort of, people describe a hero coming and saving everyone. They always exaggerate the features. So they're not going to come up with an accurate description of you. You'll be this giant, red-haired, six-armed freak. So I think you can be the no-named hero for quite a long time, as long as you don't start leaving your name and a forwarding address. Hasn't WoW become the Diablo MMO? Half the team is from Diablo. Well, possibly. We've certainly... there was an awful lot of memes about Legion being World of Diablo. Because, yes. In many ways, I don't really criticise that, because if you've got a... my attitude is, if you see a good idea in another game that will translate into your game, absolutely take it. And if it's the same company, then you're not even stealing it. So you should absolutely do that. Definitely. The problem is, I just don't think all of them have translated all that well. So yes, but they could actually do because I'll go over it again anyway, because I haven't talked about it for a while. But my issue with doing a World of Warcraft 2 is I just imagine it from the point of view of the person, the games designer, that wants to pitch this idea. So they go to the people who have got to write and think about how much it would cost, right? What are you going to be talking now? $150 million at least, and several years development time? $150 million at least. And you're going to need to find space for them in some offices at headquarters. So, you're pitching this idea to them. You want to do another Warcraft MMO, different setting. This could be after Azeroth has woken up. Maybe Azeroth is no longer inhabitable. People have sort of discussed whether that would actually necessarily be the case or not. I don't know. But for whatever, it's going to be post-Azeroth waking up. Maybe you're still on Azeroth. Maybe the shell does get left behind and it's inhabitable, but a completely changed world. But either way, you're going to kickstart the franchise again with a much more modern MMO, right? It's going to have much more modern features, a much better engine, graphics way better. Maybe you agree to move away from the Warcraft 3 graphics and actually do some... I know some people like it, but bloody hell, it's cartoonish. I put up with it just because I played it for so long. But you can actually have some really good graphics, lots of customization, a proper modern MMO. Possibly even with decent action combat as well, which I would quite like if done well. Now, you go to these guys who need to sign this check for $150 million and you pitch it to them. And they say to you, is this going to make more money than World of Warcraft? You can't possibly say yes. There is no way that World of Warcraft 2 will make as much money as World of Warcraft is even right now. How can it? Because you're not going to get all the World of Warcraft players playing it, as well as a load of others as well. You know, so the way the money men would think of it is, we have this game now. It costs us a few million to do an expansion. I don't know how many millions, but it costs a few million to do an expansion. It's not 150, right? And a load of people pay $50 up for the expansion, or $40. I don't know what the basement price is, and then we get our subscriptions and stuff like that as well, and we get our service fees, WoW tokens, all the rest of it. And WoW tokens are amazing for them because it's paying twice a monthly sub for a monthly sub. It's like 2 for the price of 1, only it's on their side, not ours. So how are you going to convince them to have a huge development team not getting any money in for their endeavours for 4 years, let's say? I don't know how long it would take. And $150 million just as a ballpark figure. I can't see it being less than that. How are you going to convince them to do that? And the problem is as well, what happens when you have to go public with it? As soon as you have to go public with it, World of Warcraft subscriptions will plummet overnight. Because the thing that's keeping a lot of World of Warcraft players playing World of Warcraft, by no means all of them, but a lot, is the fact, it's like you talk about, can we transfer our characters? It's this fact that you spent years, for some people over a decade, developing this character. You've invested a lot of time in it, and it now seems silly to abandon it. So you're saying to these people, your days are numbered, you know. At the point at which there's no long-term future for that character, a lot of people would just stop. And you'll have the gap between when you have to go public and the game actually coming out, which could last a good 2 more years. Could be 2 more years between announcing it and it coming out before you get any money at all. You don't get any money till you can at least sell the pre-orders. Anyway, let's have a look. Sorry, I missed a load of comments. Be also if the NPCs were smart AI and could see how well you've really impacted the world, addressed you accordingly, like a mythic raider is praised everywhere and so forth. The problem is, what happens if you killed their uncle? Got to think about that. We kill a lot of people just because someone says so. In fact, Dark Legacy did a comic on that one time, didn't they? Basically, some random guy says, they're being mean, go and cut their head off. We don't question it with the authorities, do we? We just go straight. It could be the head of police for all we know. They could be a bandit on the run. But we go over there and we cut their head off and we bring it back. No questions asked. We're basically mercenaries. And we're not interested at all in the motivations of our clients. Not played Diablo, what the similarities with WoW? It's lots of little things, like they brought in a lot of spell effects and spell abilities directly from Diablo and stuff like that, rather than an overall feel. Yeah, riffs for Mythic Plus, that sort of thing. Yeah, if I was an investor, that's what I mean. I just wouldn't. I don't see how they're going to convince them. But if World of Warcraft naturally faded and died, and then they did another Warcraft game, I can see then you could get, as long as they can convince them that MMOs are still worthwhile. At the point at which World of Warcraft is actually dead, then you could convince them, because it doesn't have to make as much as World of Warcraft did, because that's in the past. They're not making any money from World of Warcraft anymore. All you do is have to persuade them that they will make money from the $150 investment. $150. Blimey, if you could make an MMA for that. Wow. $150 million investment, sorry. All you have to do is convince them that they could make that back within, I don't know how quickly they have to make it back, 3 years, something like that. And that it'll have a decent amount of longevity. But the fact is that World of Warcraft proved that it can. And I think nowadays, a big MMO, like a big name MMO, it's almost expected to go for at least 10 years. And I think when World of Warcraft came out, you couldn't imagine an MMO going on for 10 years, could you? Whereas now you expect it. If it's a big budget one, you know, if you give it a decent budget, if it's a big name label, you expect it to go for at least a decade. Put Ian in charge and he'll cut the player base down quickly. He is in charge. He's just not in charge of the money. I truly believe that is why there is such a focus on PvP this expansion. No matter what Ian wants to tell us or can tell us, I believe there's a directive to make esports happening. Wow. This is possible. It is possible that... I know Blizzard, obviously, there's no speculation about that. They're pushing the esports agenda. Definitely, absolutely. But I still think people are getting the wrong idea about Battle for Azeroth. I am still going to insist that Battle for Azeroth is not a PvP expansion. That's a red herring. The Battle for Azeroth is a literal... I take the words of the title of the expansion literally. It's a battle for Azeroth. Azeroth being the world soul, not the lump of rock that we're stood on. It's not a battle for dominion over Azeroth. It's a battle for Azeroth. And the opening quest just emphasised that to me. But time will tell. Time will tell. You think they ought to do that with how they push the Mythic Plus? They are pushing. There is no doubt about it. Blizzard are throwing everything into the esports arena that they have. Absolutely. Arenas, like, the problem is that World of Warcraft, I think, is not fundamentally an enjoyable spectator sport. I don't think it is. I know that MDI gets a lot of people watching it live on Twitch. You know, I can see that. Although I don't know how it compares to other esports because I don't watch esports. The only time I watch esports is the StarCraft 2 finals at BlizzCon. Because even though I don't play StarCraft 2, I actually quite enjoy that. That's a game I don't even know how to play, and I enjoy watching it. World of Warcraft, where I do know how to play it, I don't like watching other people play it. I don't find that entertaining. You know, the only benefit of watching someone play World of Warcraft, like on a stream type situation, is to talk to them in the chat. But actually watching them do it, I don't see the benefit. It's not entertaining for me. But that's for me personally. There's been quite a lot of sports, like, over my time, you know, more physical sports, where some of them I've enjoyed playing and not watching, and some of them I've enjoyed watching and not playing. There's just some of them I just think are better as spectator sports, and some are just more enjoyable to play. I wouldn't call it a PvP expansion, but what I can say is there's been more iteration on the PvP systems for this expansion than we've seen since when. Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say that TBC brought more just with arenas and the idea of honor gear. I would say TBC was a bigger PvP expansion than Battle for Azeroth is shaping up to be. I don't really see where the PvP is coming from. You know, they've removed a battleground. I think they might be adding another one. What is it? That shit one that no one likes. Isle of Conquest or whatever the hell it is. That's gone. They've done the war mode, fair enough, but that's not a huge change. Although it might have a major impact on the way people approach being around the world, the actual change itself is not that huge, really. I don't think it would have taken very much development time to set that one up. Oh, Strand of the Ancients, is it? Okay. I don't know these ones. The only ones I know are Alterac Valley, Warsong Gulch, and Arathi Basin, simply because they're the ones that were around in vanilla when I actually did Battlegrounds. Because I wanted my Knight Captain title. So I had to do them. And it's hard. WoW is a PvE game. Yes, it is. And it's why it always annoys me when they do things to hurt the PvE experience for the sake of PvP, which I especially don't understand these days. Like, in the older days, I could sort of understand it because they were inextricably linked. But now every expansion separates them more and more. And yet we still have to have these... We're knackering your enjoyment because there's some perceived imbalance in PvP. And it always seems to be a perceived imbalance as well. It never seems to be totally supported. They're changing the ranking system in PvP too, making it more similar to other Blizz games like Overwatch. Yeah, I mean, they're even, I suppose, doing a ranking system for raiding. I mean, that's always been baffling, that when you talk about being world whatever, you don't get that from Blizzard, you get it from WoW Progress. Whereas it sounds like Blizzard are going to do, hopefully it's just as comprehensive, but given that they're going to have achievements for finishing at a certain rank for Alliance and Horde, suggests that there presumably will be some ranking leaderboard somewhere. Or hopefully it'll be more than a leaderboard, though, for raiding even. I mean, that's the thing. Blizzard, for me, it's quite nice that they're very pro-community. And that is something I appreciate because, I mean, just to, you know, as an aside, Elder Scrolls Online new expansion coming out next Monday. So I've been playing a bit of the beta, but I can't make videos on it. I can't stream it, you know, NDA. And I don't understand when it's this close to release, what the hell harm is it going to do to let people stream it and talk about it and stuff like that? Well, we can talk about it. We just can't show any footage from it. Whereas Blizzard are very, very pro community. You know, months ahead, they're letting people stream it and show footage from it and all the rest of it. In fact, they see it as a benefit. But there is sometimes a downside to it, I think, in that Blizzard sometimes rely too much on the community doing their marketing stuff. So, because it seems baffling to me that something as inherently competitive as raiding doesn't have rankings available to view on the website. That we have to go to WoW Progress. It just seems insane. Guild recruitment. There's so many things that they could do. Oh, thank you, Sarah. There's so many things they could do to help the community out. I think too often they just see the ways in which the community helps them. And I don't think they do enough to help the community. Like, think about WoW Progress. WoW Progress is so useful in many ways, but it's not a well-designed site. It's poorly designed. But we rely upon it because it's the best for the things it does. So it gives us, as I say, a ranking system for raiding. Blizzard should do that. It's not just that they could do that, they should do that. Guild recruitment. Blizzard should do that. If Blizzard, because the WoW Progress system is sort of good in that lots of people use it, but it's they've actually improved it recently with some extra filters, but it's still woefully short of the sort of filters. Oh, I see. It's like that, is it? A lot of the actual filters are going to be... there we go. Whatchamacallit? There's just not enough to find the guild you want. Whereas the... so what would I want anyway? So you'd want a guild to be... You'd want to know sort of number of nights it raids. You could sort of look that up. But you'd want it within a certain range. Like, you can't do it for a range. You'd want to know which specs they're after. You'd want to know what... You'd want the guilds to be able to look for the players as well. You'd want to know which realms it's on. That's not always that straightforward to filter, or they sort of can as well. You want to be able to contact them, so you could do it with an in-game thing. There is an in-game guild recruitment tool, but it's absolutely appalling. So there's so many ways that they can improve it and design it well, and they should do things like that. Because apart from anything else, you'd think it was in their interests. I think people have moved away from the idea of joining guilds. I don't think when they had the guild perks in, That obviously hit the reputation of guilds quite badly because you got all those cesspool guilds forming up to ensnare new players or novice players just for the purposes of making gold. And how could you resist, saying, oh, friendly people, lots of chat. There'd be loads of people in there chatting, but it'd be pointless. And you could even entice them by saying, oh, we do little lotteries as well every week for our members. And you'd just be giving away a small amount of the profits you were making from the guild. It was basically a money-making scheme for the people who set them up. So, and then, of course, you'd be getting spammed by the invites all the time if you were in a guild. So I think the reputation took a hit there. And we've now moved to the point where you can actually do quite advanced content without needing a guild. And then a lot of the people's issues, a lot of people have issues with pugs. And it comes from the fact that they don't feel sufficiently incentivized to join guilds, where almost all of those problems would go away. So, if Blizzard had a better system of encouraging people to be able to find the right guild for them, instead of just, from the limited information that's on like WoW Progress, then that would be even better. So, but I don't know. But they don't seem to want to do that. As I say, it seems to be a very one-way process with Blizzard and the community. They're very open to community stuff, like I say, but they're getting far more benefit from it than I think we are. If I had to go Horde in BfA, would I be Belf or Zandalari? Well, at the moment, I can't be Zandalari. At the point at which I could, I think I'd probably still be Blood Elf. But I'm not sure. I wouldn't rule out Zandalari before I knew, exactly how it would appear. I'm not sure they'd really suit what I would call my traditional paladin transmogs, and I'm not a huge fan of troll type costumes. Even though when I did level up that Blood Elf paladin in the alpha, I didn't transmog it. I sort of quite happily used the troll look, but it's not one I would want to keep for any length of time. So I'm not entirely sure about that one. I would, however, given that although I say it's not a PvP expansion, I think it is. I think it's fairly evident it's got a very strong faction theme running through it. Even though that theme could easily end within the first patch. After the first patch, it might be that there's no relation at all to the faction. The faction war might be almost forgotten, but I suspect it won't be. So I would, because of that, because faction has mattered more than in any expansion since ever, I think I would be disappointed if this was the expansion that I had to complete as the faction I don't really want to be. You've been trying the Wowhead dressing room thing. Their feet and palace sets look a bit jarring. Yes, I think they probably would. Yeah, that Wowhead wardrobe feature is actually quite handy. Yes, I like that quite. I've used that a few times. Faction changed your palette to Horde, Belf. You got to say it feels weirdly depressing. Your server at RP realm was very low pop, and you feel incredibly out of place around those spikes. Well, yes, this is the problem. I mean, well, I don't know that Blizzard ever said this, but I think it was surmised that Blood Elves were given to the Horde, even though they would naturally fit more with the Alliance. They were given to the Horde so the Horde could have some pretty boys. Because before that, there was nothing very pretty about the Horde. Any of the Horde races. I don't think it is strange that there's no Kulturan Paladins. I would be surprised if there were Kulturan Paladins, given that there's no... I'm not aware of any links between the Paladins and Kulturans from Warcraft 2. Even though Paladins and Kulturas both appeared in Warcraft 2 in the storyline, it wasn't like together. So I would have been surprised if there were. And also, I don't think they really need it. I think the Paladin choices for Alliance is more than fine. I really don't know why you'd need another Paladin human choice anyway. I don't really know why you need two. I mean, obviously, you can't not have Lightforged Draenei Paladins, but there's no real reason to have had two Draenei versions of Paladins either. Yes, I think they are. I think, obviously, the way they've set the storyline up, they've got a much higher affinity with Druidism and maybe even Shamanism. I don't know if they're planning to have Kulturan Shamans, but that would fit as well from what I've seen of the storyline, playing it on the Alpha and Beta. So, you know, you could argue like Shamans, Druids certainly. I'm not so sure about Paladins. Unless it was like as a sort of witch hunter type theme. There were no links for Taurans either up to Kata, and yet we have Sunwalkers. Well, yes, but that was Blizzard playing fast and loose with their own lore. I mean, we know that they do this. At the end of the day, they can conjure up anything. You know, they can do what they like and then just write some, you know, they could just go to the pub one night and write on the back of a napkin their explanation for it all. And most people will be perfectly delighted with it. You know, I mean, they've now contradicted the first volume of the Warcraft Chronicles, and that was supposed to be we've set the story in stone now. This is it, definitive version. That lasted all of 2 years. So, Kulturans have been subliminally infiltrated by the Void or Old Gods. Well, some of them sort of have. Have you seen all the tentacles coming from the ground in their architecture? Yes, but that's only in certain areas. That's not all the way through as such. But you've got to bear in mind, just because people have images of things doesn't mean they worship them. Sometimes it's just a recognition of a powerful force that they need to remain aware of. The reason you did faction change your paladin was actually indeed the race choice on Alliance side. What? Loads of race choice on the Alliance side. You can play every sensible character as a paladin. Every sensible race. Would Lightbound Orcs? Lightbound Orcs, not a thing, really. Would it open the door for Magar Lightbound Paladins? I mean, there's nothing to stop any race, apart from the obvious one, becoming a paladin. All they have to be able to do is attune themselves to the light. In theory, if they can be a priest, with one exception, they can be a paladin. So it's not that there's anything fundamentally opposing the idea of an orc paladin. But it just doesn't sit right. Let us listen again to what Ian Hazacosta said about the issue of gnomes.
Sorry, no current plans for gnome paladins, but
Damn.
maybe.
His name's Mr. Gnome Paladin. You ruined his screen name.
I know. We want to, like, we try to be as flexible as possible when it comes to, you know, the race class combinations. Part of it is like the nature of paladins. It's this like orderly dedication to the light, this combination of things that feels somewhat at odds with gnomish nature. Sorry.
Oops, sorry. Right, so exactly the same issue with orcs. It's not in their nature. That orderly, you know, dedicated thing is not really what orcs are all about. You know, even before they became fell tainted, it was still largely about being savage. That's their nature. They sort of they're very aggressive. They're not at peace in any format. So they don't really support the Paladin code, the creed. There are Magar priests. That's what I mean. You know, the fact that, you know, if they can, that's what I mean. Just from a holy point of view, if they can wield the light in one form, they can wield it in another. But it's just the nature thing. Paladins are supposed to be these, you know, ultimately, it's supposed to be possible for them to be at peace. And it's not really what orcs are about. They're savage. The idea of a paladin saying me smash is not really credible. You heavily dislike dwarves. Big time. Never. Humans feel too generic. Well, unfortunately, that's because they're us. I don't think it is because they're generic as such. Like, dwarves and elves are also generic to fantasy tropes. It's just that humans are us. Draenei... Oh, you're just picking faults here. Draenei, I just don't like horns, tails and hooves. You're just picking on things here. What's Blood Elves got then? What's Blood Elves got? They're just pretty humans with pointy ears and unnecessarily long eyebrows. And how they manage to have them defy gravity like they do is beyond me. I can understand people not wanting to play a human, because if you want to really get yourself into the fantasy setting, I get that. But Blood Elves are not that exotic as things go. They are as similar to a human as you can get without it actually being human. Draenei are the most fantastical race that can so far play a paladin. They are the least like anything. I mean, I know obviously they've got some similarities to goats, but they don't really look like a goat. Whereas like Tauren, they do look like cows. They even made a Dreadlord paladin. Yes, yes, the Nathrazim. Well, Nathrazim, I suppose, technically rather than Dreadlord, but because they changed what Nathrazim are as well. That's another thing that they changed the law on. What Nathrazim are, not demons, apparently. That was a bit of a bombshell. So anyway. In fact, I can hardly think of a race that is less like a human than, I suppose, trolls and Draenei. I can't think of any of the current races that are less like humans. I mean, maybe goblins to stretch. Pandaren. No, they're still quite similar to humans. They're just like furries, really. You can just imagine it's in a costume. Yeah, but Vulpera aren't a playable race. And they're really just furry goblins. And if Vulpera ever became paladins, they'd only have two abilities, Bubble and Hearth. It's all they'd ever use. Be no point in giving them any other abilities. If you smash things, you might as well look fabulous. Depends which you go for. If you go for a male blood elf, you sort of just about get away with it. The female blood elves have weird elbows. I can't be doing with them. There. You only play... So you're playing a female blood elf. Oh dear, I can only do so much. But anyway, we've come to, well, 5 minutes past, I suppose, technically. We've come to the end for today. Thanks for coming on, everyone. I will be on tomorrow with the usual raiding with the guild if anyone wants to come on and chat. But hopefully we can clear things as quickly as we did last week, actually, because it's too hot to be raiding. It's too hot to even be sitting here, but it's certainly too hot to be raiding. I need to go and lie down in like a bowl of ice or something. So thanks for coming on all, and until next time, I will see you later.